Hello and welcome to Living a Culture of Life podcast by Human Life International. I'm your host, Colleen Haupt, and I'm joined today by our president, Father Boquet.
Colleen, as always, it's a joy to be with you today, especially on the subject we're going to talk about.
Yes, and today we're going to be talking about the March for Life. We both attended last week along with other people from HLI, and so we're going to talk about the March for Life and why it's still happening this year and what we can do moving forward.
Very good.
Yeah, so let's just jump right in. Since Roe v. Wade's been overturned, why did we go to the march last week?
It's a question that's been asked by so many reporters, and I remember watching some of the footage from the March for Life, and really it was a question that was being posed by people on the sidelines. Why are you here this year? What's this all about? Roe's been overturned. And, the reality is, Colleen, yes, Roe has been overturned. But the important thing is the presence, of pro-lifers and the pro-life generation still to be very visible, and especially in places like Washington, D.C. and in state capitals, to continue to voice, for the unborn, voice for those who have no voice to defend themselves, because abortion is still happening. The crime against human life still is happening around this country. And of course, in D.C., we want to keep ourselves visible to our legislators and to our lawmakers and saying, we must continue to work, to protect human life and to find means to support women in need and where abortion is eradicated from the mindset of this country. And until that happens, we will continue to march, around the anniversary of Roe, not because of Roe, but because of human life and the dignity of life, and to remind our legislators that we have so much work still to do. And I know that many people who were at the march in Washington, D.C. were then traveling back to their own states, because a number of marches and rallies and walks were happening not only this past weekend, over the weekend, but also going into the next few weeks ahead. So we still have much to do, so we need to be out there. So it was great. I think, Colleen, just as a little side note, one thing I noticed when because we actually were fortunate to be near the front of the march.
Yeah.
And so, which is not very, it's rare for us. Normally we get somewhere in the middle and we make our way through and into the group and we stay there. But this time we found ourselves way up in the front, and it was a great blessing because, we had a chance to see, so many people, in the very beginning, on the sidelines and waving, and even in some of the Rayborn building, I saw some of the legislators out on the balcony, waving, acknowledging, thank you for what you're doing. That was great. And because sometimes when you come towards the end, you don't always see that.
Yeah.
And, but also what was nice was looking back. And that's what I wanted to, people kept asking, well, how many people were there? Did you see as many people as you did in years past? I've been going for many, many years and participating even before HLI. And I can say, as I was making my way back away from the march itself, what I noticed as I reached near 6th Avenue, that I could see off of Constitution and near Pennsylvania, that I can still see the very end of the march. So
Wow.
that tells me, that there were many, many people there. So it was a great showing of supporters for life. And I think it really showed, because I think some people thought, would as many people go? I mean, after all, Roe is overturned. But what you heard so many people say, as I just said, our work is not done. Yes, Roe has been overturned. We know we have 13 states where abortion has been limited or, no longer permissible. But hey, we have still so much to do. But it was great to see that kind of crowd.
Mm-hmm. Well, and you had the moment too where you could turn around on the hill and you look down the hill and see everyone coming. And I love that moment in the march every year that I've been. So it was great to have that moment again this year.
And it was a beautiful day.
It was.
It's always a beautiful day because we're always together. But, this year it was sunny. It was nice weather. And it wasn't overly cold. It wasn't raining.
I think the wind died down a little bit too when we were marching.
But you were able to really turn and get a real good look at the people in the crowd. And it was dense. It wasn't just, a small group of people in the middle. The whole road was full, and it's always a great blessing to do that.
Yeah. Why should we still remember the anniversary of Roe? Like, obviously that was 50 years ago on January 22nd. So why should we still remember that going forward, either with a March for Life, or some people were saying we should still be fasting or praying that day? Why is it important for pro-lifers to still remember that?
Well, as I mentioned, in so many of our states, we've been very fortunate because of pro-life legislation and because governors were willing to sign that legislation into law, that life is being protected. So with the overturning of Roe, we saw many of the states be able to advocate for life, and which they had always been able to do, but because of Roe, they could never put into full force. now that has happened. But we have so many more states where this is not the case, where abortion is still legal, or there are exceptions and so forth that still need to be challenged. And so we need to keep this voice, this presence, this mindset of defending human life. But the reason why we want to stay, for example, like people thought the march in D.C., well, why don't we move the date to June 24th when Roe was overturned? Now, that would still be an important day to do. And I know that many people will probably do something around that occasion. But what we need to do by staying near Roe is also to remind us that, our work is not done, we just said. Number two, to remind us how easy it can be that it could change. We know that the mindset of many in the House of Congress, in the Senate and the House, are not of the same mindset as we are here today. We know that many of them advocate for abortion, believe that abortion is a right, and if given the opportunity, once again, to be in positions of authority and influence, we could see them passing another bill and maybe getting that bill signed into law. So we should never let our guard down. We should always be vigilant, which means we should always be present. And if nothing else, even if we move to the point where we've eradicated abortion across this land, the mindset of abortion is gone, abortion is illegal across this land, we will still need to do something to keep vigilant, to be vigilant, because it's so easy for people to forget. And, what I love is how many of our young people, which, Colleen, you would fall into that generation, refer to themselves as a pro-life generation. And I think that's a great way of looking. And what I love now is to hear them speaking post-Roe generation.
We are the post-Roe generation. So many shirts.
Yeah, I think that's a great phrase. But it reminds them, and I remember watching some of the young people in their interviews saying, same thing, why are we here today? Why are we keeping this day in remembrance? And of course, we didn't march on the actual anniversary. Sunday, June 22nd was the 50th anniversary. And so we always are near the Friday prior to that. But what was great to say is that, to hear all of these young people say, our work is not done. We have still so much to do. And not just with the legal side. What I love to hear the post generation say was that now we need to increase our resources. We need to increase our presence. We need to really pull all of our resources to be there for women in need across this nation. And we need to be there not just in the moment, for them and the birth of their child, but leading up to that birth, after that birth, and giving them the resources they need. That's great to hear. And I can tell you as a pro-life leader, that's encouraging. Because that's been my words all these many years. It's the idea that we want to eradicate abortion. We want to put an end to this great violence and crime against the unborn, to our innocent brothers and sisters. And we want to make it where no woman ever thinks that abortion is the answer to her situation. But to do that, we need to have, as we do now, pregnancy care centers, resource centers. We need to have more than that. We need to be there with financial resources. We need to be there with legal resources and physical resources, and not just for that 1 year, but for ever how long she has a need, and to do everything we can to be of assistance. And to hear the younger generation, pick up that rally call and to realize, and, it's wonderful to hear, because it tells me it will become a reality. And I imagine, many years, and sorry to kind of backtrack a little bit, but I remember Nellie Gray. And I remember Nellie being there in the founding of the march, but knowing Nellie and knowing the history and knowing how many people really tried to dissuade her. There was not a need for the march. People didn't think there was a need, but Nellie and those around her had the courage and the foresight to realize, no, we need to be present. We need to be here. And we need to be not only present, but vocal in our opposition against this great violence and this egregious act done by the Supreme Court. But with that, Nellie, also, if we think back to the people with pregnancy care centers, we don't need as many, we don't need that. But no, we do, and we still do. So, in other words, I'm very grateful to the people that didn't listen to the naysayers, who didn't listen to those that tried to dissuade them or tried to discourage them in any way. But they, like Father Marks and many others, they picked up that baton and ran with it. And we are here today because of them. But as that post-Roe generation says, there is still much to be done.
Well, and I think in some ways, going back to the March for Life and the founding of it, I think for a lot of younger pro-lifers, that's been like a key part of their lives growing up. I looked forward to the march every year. Got to travel to DC. You got to be part of this crowd of huge pro-lifers. You're not alone when you're doing it. You're in a crowd of other people that care about what you care about. And I don't know, I found it always very energizing and hopeful. And I know that in the past for the march, there was this balance people are trying to strike between being somber because it was the anniversary of Roe,
Right.
but joyful because we're celebrating life. Right. And it was kind of nice this year because it was like, oh, well, Roe's gone, so this is still sad, but we can be more celebratory than usual.
Exactly.
But,
and also, as you just said, just always we are a people of hope. We're a people of life. And one thing that's very clear when you walk around the march and even leading up to the march, you see the streets of D.C. filled with baby carriages and young families and families in general. You see busloads of young adults, young college students, high school students. You even see, grandparents, in other words, the whole face of the family is there. And what's so beautiful, I met this year legislators, that they weren't in front of cameras, but walking in the crowd, walking among people, state legislators. I even saw a few federal faces out there of our federal legislatures. And it was interesting to see that, at least I thought that's who they were, and I couldn't get close enough. But from a distance, I recognized them. And I thought to myself, wonderful. Even if it was just for a moment, even if they just were doing an interview down the street and they walked out there, it's encouraging. And the sad thing is we know the national media still refuses to show it. And that's okay. Guess what? The light still shines. And, and I saw one little camera image on a video someone sent to me that must have been on top of one of the buildings near the Capitol. And they show from a distance, a good distance, but you could zoom in if they tried, how many people were out there. Wow. And so it really is a life-changing event. And for me, again, as a pro-lifer who's been involved in this for so many decades, like you, I always looked forward to the march. I look forward to being with friends from around the country. I look forward to be united in this effort. It's a moment of solidarity with the preborn. It's also in solidarity with every woman around our country in need. There's so much that happens on those days, and watching people, on the street, but also, at the various pro-life, our booth, at the hotel, where sponsored by the March for Life, where so many pro-life leaders and organizations are gathered together and under, kind of in just a couple of rooms and working together and across the aisle from each other. And you see so many people coming and going and stopping and, saying, keep up the great work, proud of the work that you do, supporting the work, or even for some people not familiar with all these apostolic works, for the first time being introduced. And what I walked away with, because I did a little short interview for a newspaper, haven't seen yet if it was published or not, but it was just they asked me, one of the things I've kind of learned, if you will, from the event. And one thing I brought up was what I'm always amazed is the face of the pro-life movement and how large that face is and how unique it is. And in that room, in those simple rooms, not all were there, but a great, great many pro-life leaders and their groups were there. And we're all united in this cause. Even though we're all approaching the subject from different ways and different vantage points and approaches and topics, but we all are there for a single cause, to eradicate the mindset of abortion and to eradicate the violence of abortion. And so we all come in together like flowers in a garden, different flowers, different species, but all there, united together. And we're one. And I think that's something quite beautiful. And that's something that can be used to really move forward. And that always impresses me, every time we do this. And at rallies across the world, I see the same thing. And I'm very much touched by that, because not one group, not one individual is going to make this happen. It's all of us united together. So that's very exciting to see.
Yeah. Well, and then moving forward, you touched on this slightly before, but what can we do moving forward to create a culture of life? I know you were talking about pregnancy care centers and all of that, but can you go a little bit more in depth? I know you talked about it in your article. So
right. Well, the one thing that, if we're going to say as a people that we are a pro-family, a pro-life people, then it needs to reflect, in every aspect of our social environment. And that's really the challenge is, how do we create systems and policies and laws that really do reflect that? And so that's why we keep our presence at these marches for the legal side of it, for the legislative side, because we want to challenge those positions and promote pro-life, pro-family legislation that supports life, defends life, and serves life. And at the same time, we want to create within those systems other systems. So, for example, let's use the tax initiatives. That's one way that as a country we need to reevaluate. Do we really we say that we're for the family, but, do we have high taxes? How do our taxes affect the family? How does it affect, young couples deciding on children and so forth? And so we need to look at that. We need to look at, how our maternity leave policies are in a sense of are being employed. Paternity leave. There's many ways of looking at that. We can look at also prices of food. How do we deal with this? We have high inflation. This affects families, and not just our young families. It affects families in general, and it affects the most vulnerable. And so all these things and so many others. Healthcare. Education. So it's very expensive, to educate your children. This needs to be looked at. Healthcare. How do you provide care for your children, for your family? So these are just but a few that need to be revisited and looked at. And the good thing is we've done this before. Mm-hmm. If we go back and look at healthcare in general, we realize that what you and myself are so familiar with just 50, 60 years ago was not the same. So we have made tremendous progress in making healthcare available, to people. We need to continue to look at that, but to keep costs down and to have that regulations where it's not as expensive, just to welcome a child into this world. When I hear, husbands and wives tell me what it costs, quote, to have their child born, I'm shocked, but I shouldn't be shocked. With everything else, but just the idea of going to the grocery store and seeing the cost of just general goods. So my point for bringing it up in the article is just that, to stir a conversation. But what's beautiful, Colleen, I'm not the only one. I signed on as HLI's president to another group of pro-life leaders raising the same issues, raising the same concerns. But I've noticed in many interviews after the march, hearing people say the same thing. So what this tells me is that we are now at a good point where we can, now that Roe itself has been overturned, and we know that we're seeing such pro-life legislation happening in many states and challenges to the laws. And same time, we see what happened in California and other states, which means our work just is all the more important. But what we're seeing now is an opportunity to address the other issues, the other side of the equation. So, for example, our pregnancy care centers. Most of these are supported by donations, by nonprofits. Mm-hmm. Thank goodness. But, there are so many other resources out there that the state, that we should have access to, providing this kind of care. We're actually saving the states much money, in this regard. So why should we not have access to those kinds of resources? Because we are helping women, we are helping families, we are protecting life, and we're providing resources that are vital to family life. These are the kinds of things we need to see develop, and we need to keep advocating for them. So I believe we're in a very good moment right now to move that kind of conversation, and to hear again so many people talking about it. Mm-hmm. Tells me it's happening. And to hear remember that young woman I just made reference to a while ago, that post-Roe generation, to hear her elevating that conversation tells me that our young adults see that. They see that it has to be not just the pregnancy care centers, but a litany of other things need to come to bear. That's exciting.
Yeah, it is. Okay, this is just like a fun question. Now that Roe is gone, is there anything that you think that they should change about the march, like what date it's on or the route? I know the route kind of changed this year, but we still ended up at the Supreme Court. Yeah. Is there anything that just fun stuff that you think should be changed about it?
Not really. I think that the rally is important. Kind of invigorating people. I think the actual path is good. It would be nice that maybe to pass in front of the White House, but but guess what? We can go stand in front of the White House somewhere nearby and do our little our own little protest within reason. But I do think the route is good, because we want to be able to pass by the very buildings in which these kinds of conversations are occurring. So I was a little surprised, because I was told before the march that we were not going to end up at the Supreme Court. And we did.
Might have just been habit.
Well, maybe,
I think people
we made our way because we passed by the Rayborn building and then made our way up and around, and it was quite beautiful, because it in the sense that there was another rally going on there. There were protesters going on, and that's okay, because the other side, we. Let them speak. But it's important for us to keep our voices present. So I was very happy with the route. We took a couple of turns for various reasons, but I don't know why. But we ended up, like I said, right at the Supreme Court.
I think that was so we could go in front of the Capitol. I think that's why they did.
Okay.
Like they kind of jogged out and around and back, and I think it was so we could pass in front of the Capitol.
And we did, yeah. That was a different route. Yeah.
I've heard that we were supposed to end in front of the Capitol, and then we ended up at the court. I'm not sure exactly what the official route was, but I just follow the crowd.
But it was also good at the because I know it's hard to house in a sense of in one location, but it was so much fun. And this year I had not seen in previous years, and it could be because of the weather. It could be because the weather was really nice. Is that people gathered outside. I met people at local coffee houses, and people were just talkative. If people were just visiting. I'd walk down the street, to pick up something and meet someone, and someone stopped me and just started talking. In previous years, maybe because it was so cold and rainy that people were just focused on getting to a door and getting inside and all bundled up. But it was. I found a different spirit. And I found that very exciting. And I'm hoping that as the next year comes around and, throughout the year in the various marches, that this joyful spirit, this knowing that we've accomplished a great task, a great goal. And what I would say, Colleen, that I would add is that what I thought also was good is I heard more people comment about those that came before us. That the generations of people that really laid the groundwork for all of this, and that we owe them a tremendous gratitude. And to hear people acknowledge that, talk about that now, out of respect for what they did and all that hard work that's been done throughout these decades, that now we have a responsibility in being good stewards of that and to keep it going. And that was talked about a lot, and that's exciting to see. So I'm hoping that kind of momentum will be what spearheads new projects, new opportunities, new ways of approaching this subject. So again, it was just very, very exciting.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much, Father. This was a good discussion. I love talking about the March for Life after it's over. It's such a uniting, exciting experience. So,
and if I may just make one last comment, I know that many state marches now are happening that did not happen before. Because now, and some people would say, well, doesn't it all turn to the state? We've already answered that. It does not. It's both and. It's not one or the other, that this is still a federal issue and it's still a state issue. And so now, yes, many of our arguments are now being taken to the states to challenge, current laws or to pass pro-life legislation. So I just want to encourage, our listeners and to encourage others, to get involved on the state level as well, and if it's something that you have not been engaged in, here's an opportunity. I know that there's a large group here in Virginia that are going to be attending the march in Richmond. That's great to hear, and many of them came to D.C. and now they're going off to march there. Yeah. I know there are many other marches and rallies and walks happening across our nation, and it would be good for people in their own states to know when they are. And if they're not able to do something at the state level, at the community level, remember, it's on every level. So this is why this conversation is far, far from over. There's so much work still for us to do. So get involved. It's important for us to and if there's nothing happening, maybe the Lord is calling one of our listeners to be the one that spearheads it, organizes it. So we want this momentum to keep building.
Thank you, Father. And to all of our listeners, please remember to like, follow, and subscribe, whether you're listening on YouTube or Rumble or any of our audio platforms. I hope this was some great encouragement to go out and do things for the pro-life movement if you're able to. And keep on living the culture of life. God bless.